Hello and welcome to Power Platform Principles. My name is Daniel Halls. I'm the Power Platform Consulting Lead at FSP. My video today is to talk you through the patch function in a Power App Canvas app. This is the second part of a video that's already up on my YouTube channel. It's the one around collections. So what I've done here, this is like a follow-on of the same scenario. So you can follow it through from end to end. The first part of the video was all focused on collections. So it's about collecting data within your app locally and using that to fill in forms and save and store locally in the app. So what we want to move on to now is the patch function. And the patch function is going to enable us to do some updates to records in those collections, but also it's the function that we're going to use to take our data from the app and send it off to the data source. So I'm going to get straight into the video. So if you want to check out the first video for the background of the scenario, but I'm sure you'll pick it up as we get straight into it. As ever, if you like the video, give us a like. Pop over to the channel and subscribe if you want to see more of what I'm doing. And please, any comments that you have, put them below. Any questions, I will do my best to answer those. And any of the good ones, who knows, might be turned into future videos as well. Patch is really handy for a number of different reasons. And the first way that I'm going to show you to use patch is actually still within the app itself. I'm going to patch into our collection to update an item. Because let's say, for example, we have an example where we want to change Tom Thumb from red brick house to blue brick house. If we were to submit the form again, it would actually go in and just add another one at the bottom. As you've seen, we've got lots of Tom Thumbs on there. So we need to be able to see if we've already got that record. And if we have, we're going to patch an update to it. So let's do that first. So we're going to take our save button and we're going to work to improve the formula that we've already got in here. So we've got collect, create the static item. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and do an if statement. We're going to say if the item has a name of Tom Thumb, update it. If not, create a new one. And I'm only doing it based on the name for the purpose of this video. You could do it based on an ID number, you could do lookups, you could be smart about it, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to do it based on the name for this video. So we're going to start off by writing if. So we're going to do one logic test, get a true value, and then we're going to do an else condition that says, if that wasn't true, create a new item. So the condition we want to look for, and I'm going to just really hard code this a little bit, and we're basically going to say if Tom Thumb is in col, it's col patch, isn't it? List dot name. That's the name of our column. Then we're going to hit comma. So that's our if statement. We're now in the true value. So you can see how the formula breaks down. It says if, logical test, true value. We've just finished the true value. So we're now into the, okay, what are we going to do with it? Sorry, we just finished the logical test. We're now in the true value. So what do you want to do if that passes as true? Well, we don't want to collect, because we've said that will collect a new item to the end of it. We want to actually patch to that record that we've found. Now, because we've got lots of Tom Thumbs on there, this is actually going to update them all. I might tidy that up in a moment so we can just show it on one particular record. So what we want to do now is we're going to go patch. So the patch formula comes in like this. We're going to patch our data source, and then we're going to find the record that we want to update, and then we're going to update it. Yeah. Or if we're using it later on, you'll see we actually can go data source, and then what's the record we're creating. So where are we patching to? Well, we're patching to col patch list. And then when we're in col patch list, what we now need to do is just find that record. So we know there's one in there. Now we need to find that specific one. So we're going to say lookup, which is a way to look up records. We're in, and this we'll unpick this in a moment. Look up source condition. So we look up the source, which is col patch, and the condition is going to be when Tom Thumb equals, and as I said, I'm just sort of hard coding this in, when Tom Thumb is equal to name. And we don't have to do list dot name because we're actually looking into the collection already. So we've already said we're in the collection, here's the name. Whereas up here, we weren't looking anywhere, so we had to say where to look first. So we don't have to do that here. So we can now close off the lookup part, because that's going to find our record. We're going to get some squiggles because we haven't finished the patch formula, but that's absolutely fine. We're now going to hit comma, and you'll see that the handy bar across the top is telling us I'm now back at my patch formula. So I've gone if, patch, lookup. I'm now back at the other part of my patch formula, which is update. So we want to go and update a particular record. Now, we can do an update to all of the record, or we can do an update to a specific column if we want to. We don't have to update them all, which is a really handy tool to remember. So patch is also written with a curly brace, like we had in the collection when we were defining it manually. So I'm going to open and close a curly brace and close off my patch functions parenthesis, and then I'm going to hit a new line underneath. We've still got a whinge because it's whinging at us about the if statement not being finished. Don't worry. We'll close that all off in a moment and finish that when we do our else value, which is already written, but we'll come to that in a moment. So if Tom Thumb is in coalpatchlist.name, do this first. Patch, coalpatchlist, look up in the coalpatch list and find Tom Thumb equals name. Now we've got lots of those, so we'll actually update them all. But that's by the by. If we'd have put this in the first place, we wouldn't have ended up with lots of them. We would have updated it rather than changed it. So what's the update we want to make? Well, let's say we want to update all of the parts of the formula because we might change anything. So let's say title. And title, what's that going to be? Well, actually, we can probably copy this from below because we're going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to take this for the sake of speed, and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to replace that title there. I'm going to paste that in because we're going to do exactly the same thing. Should we get rid of the red squiggles? Yes, we should. So we're back to our, so if we go after this parentheses, which is part of patch, there and there, and if we hit a comma, we're going to go into the else value of our if statement, which is this bottom bit we've already written. So a comma should fix this. Ta-da! I'm pleased that worked first time. I wasn't 100% sure that I'd got everything in the right place, but I clearly had. I'm missing one thing, and I can see what it is. It's a close off of my if statement, which is right at the very end, like so. And that fixes all of our formula. Let me just use the handy format painter, so I don't have to write in this way anymore, really, but it's easier to see. Handy format painter will just tidy that up a little bit more for us, and then we'll talk you through what's happening on this formula. We're saying if Tom Thumb is in the coalpatchlist.name, we're going to go into the true value of our if statement. And the true value of our if statement is to patch, and the data source is coalpatchlist. The source, the record, we're going to look up, and we're going to look in the coalpatch list for any records with the name of Tom Thumb. Once we've found those records, we're going to go to the update part of our formula. And the update part of our formula is to patch these changes based on the data fields in our form. So based on those, so if we're using the form, and we do lots of things normally to make the app work better. It might be a different form somewhere, it might be a lookup, it might be, all sorts of other things. But for now, we're just going to use the one button. Press save. Then we've got the close off of our patch statement here, and you'll see that we're back to our if statement because we've closed all of the patch formula off. After we've closed off the true value of our if statement, we need to do the else value, which is optional. You don't have to do anything in the else value, you can leave that blank. But we want to say, well, if there isn't a Tom Thumb, we want to create a new record for Tom Thumb. And so we'll do the collect that we already had in place earlier on. So we'll collect up and put that item in. So what we should find now, and what I might do actually for ease and visibility here, is actually reduce down the number of Tom Thumbs. So I'm going to do that by just rerunning the formula we wrote the formula we did right at the beginning in the onStart property, because that will recollect up the only record that we've got in SharePoint that is open. Okay, so let's press play and let's press save, because we've still got this Tom Thumb detail in here. So what will happen now is if I press save, it will create my Tom Thumb in my collection. Now, if I press it again, nothing visible will happen because we haven't changed these details, and it will go through that logical gate and it will say, is there a Tom Thumb? Yes, there is. Great, let's update the Tom Thumb record. But there's nothing changed, so it won't update. So let's just press it again to prove a point. Nothing happened. Very exciting. But let's say now Tom Thumb rings us up and says, oh, my house has changed and I now live at Blue Brick House. And if I press the save button at the bottom, our formula will kick in. Is there a Tom Thumb record? Yes, there is. Okay, let's update the record of Tom Thumb to see what's changed. And the red brick house will change to blue brick house, like so. When you press the save button, we're creating a new record in a collection with the app. But also that formula is doing a lookup into that collection first and saying, is there a record called Tom Thumb? If so, we'll update it. Now there's one tiny downside with that, and that is that we've actually got it hard coded to Tom Thumb. So what that means is if there is a Tom Thumb in the record, in the collection at all, then we're going to update it with whatever's in our form. So for example, if we take Tom Thumb out and put in, say, Sandra Smith, like that, and she lives in a road, if I press save now, our formula is going to kick in and go, there is a Tom Thumb, so now we need to update Tom Thumb with this record. So if I press save, we've lost Tom Thumb. Not the most ideal, robust solution in the world. So we're just going to fix that to finish our formula off. And to do so, we're going to make that hard-coded value of Tom Thumb dynamic. We're going to make it be the text that's in the box here. So this is our text input 2. Our formula is on the save button. So we're going to have a look at that. So all we need to do is we need to take out our Tom Thumb, which was just the sort of hard coding of that value. And we need to say text input 2.text. So what that's basically saying is whatever text is in that text field, is that in the collection as a name? And remember, we're doing it as a name. It could be anything. It could be an ID number. It could be a smart lookup. It could be all sorts. But for now, we'll just keep it simple, and we'll just keep it to the text input value. And we're going to do the same down here. So if we take out that rule here, we're going to say text input, text input 2. It's not liking my down arrows. How? Come on, please. Input. Oh, it's because I'm mistyping. I've got to actually look where I'm typing. I'm pressing M instead of N. That's because I'm trying to do it without looking. And it's late, but there we are. Right, so we've got text input 2, text input 2. So we're basically replacing that static hard coded and said, what have we written in the box? What's written in that text input field? Is that already in our record? So if we now go back to our play, and we can see now if I leave Sandra Smith in for a moment and say she now lives in Road Street, and I press save, it's now no longer looking for Tom Thumbs, it's looking for whatever value is in this text box. So I can press save, it will go, there is a Sandra Smith, and we'll update her address for you. Ta-da! If we now add Tom Thumb back in, and we remember he lives in Blue Brick House now, and we hit save, great, we can do that. And we can just now start adding more records. We could add Joe, and he could live in a house like so. So we're now getting this lookup. But if we want to update Joe, again, we can, because it will look for Joe as the value rather than the hard-coded Tom Thumb. And there you go, Joe updated to Street House. So we've finished that sort of little bit of formula off and made it a bit smarter. Now, again, there's a number of different ways to use that formula. This is just an example of how we can use simple fields in the form, push that data into a collection, patch that data into the collection as updates, or collect as new records. And if you want any more information on the collect side of it, remember that was my first video of this. It's on the YouTube channel already, so you can go and take a look at that, and that will dive into the collection side of it in more detail. But for the patch function, we've got that lookup rule, find the person and update them if you want with their new information. So what we've got now is we've got this list of people here in our collection in our app. We're patching updates to those, but we're not sending any data anywhere. So if we look back at our SharePoint list for a moment, we can still see we've only got the 2 records. We've got Daniel Hall's Won the Street, which is an open record, and we've got Mr. Joe Blogs, which is the closed record. And we had a rule in the collections video, which is, like I say, the first video of this little series, where we said only bringing the open records into the app. So that's why we've got 2 records, one open, one closed, but the new records that we've created here are just local in the app. So if I close the app now, they'll disappear, they'll get lost. So we need a way of sending these back to the data source. So this our save button here for the form. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually do another new button, insert button. And I have to say it's really painful to not do any design work at all and try and lay stuff out nice and neatly, but I'm doing my best. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a button that says save all to SharePoint. Okay, a horribly designed named button, but what we basically want to do is we want to save all of those to SharePoint. So before we get into the formula for the button, I just want to point out a small update that I've gone through and made to the formula on the save button. So in here, I have just been through my collection and renamed what I want the columns to be called in the collection. The reason I've done that is because when we're going back to a data source, to SharePoint, I'd be writing a formula that says make the title be title, which can become a little bit ambiguous, and rightly so. SharePoint and Power Apps kind of have a little bit of a hissy fit over each other and whose column is named the right thing. So I've just added col title, col name, col address, col status to the front of them, so that we now can write the formula a little bit more cleanly in the next part. So that's my my little update on the formula. But for the save to SharePoint, the broad structure of the process is going to be the same. We're going to be writing a formula that's going to still do that check. It's going to say, does the record exist in SharePoint? Yes or no. If it does, update it. If it doesn't, then we're going to create a new one. However, the difference that we do have is instead of now doing it for one single item on a form and pushing it into a collection, we're actually going to be doing it for all the items in the collection and pushing them off to SharePoint. So we do need a way of dealing with all of the records that we might have in our collection and going through all of those at the same time. And there's a couple of different things that we need to write in terms of sending data to SharePoint, which we'll cover off as well. There's a few little extra pieces in there, but broadly speaking, the formula is going to be fairly similar. So which is good. So we get to refresh and run through it again. So I'll write it out from scratch so we can work through it together again. So the first step that I said that we need on our button is a way of looping through all the records in the collection, which is for all. So for all in Power Apps land asks for a source and then gets you to put in a formula. The formula can be as long and as complicated as you like, but basically what it's saying is for all items in the data source, this bit, do whatever this formula is. So all of our formula is going to be in the second half of the for all. So it's going to step through each record and apply that formula to that item. So data source is going to be col patch list. So for everything in our collection, do the following. We still want that logic gate at the beginning that says if the item exists. So we need our if statement, which has got our logical test of does the, and remember I've renamed these, so the column name is now col name instead of name. And we're going to say, is that in patch to me? Now before we were writing, is it in the collection? But we're now checking back to SharePoint and saying, is it in the name column? So is col name in patch to me dot name? If it is, we want to send an update, don't we? So if it's in there, we're going to go to our patch function. So again, drawing a lot of similarities to the formula we wrote a moment ago. Where are we going to patch? Well, we're going to patch to the SharePoint list, patch to me. What are we going to patch? So the next bit in our patch formula, so patch, where's the source? What's the record? So because we're going to find the record, we can do that right now with our lookup. So the lookup is again, the same, basically the same expression that we had before. We were looking up in the collection, but now we're going to be looking up into SharePoint. So lookup, and I'll run back through this in a moment so it makes sense, but we're doing lookup in patch to me. And what do we want to look up? So in here, we want to look up the name, which is the name of the column in SharePoint. So the name needs to be equal to col name. So col name is the name of the column in my collection. So you can see why actually I went through and renamed those, because that will become quite a confusing rule for Power Apps and SharePoint to divvy up between themselves. Is name equal to name? Well, you've got name. No, I've got name. So they might have a little argument about it. I like to imagine SharePoint and Power Apps as things, especially if you ever see me talk about delegation warning, they do get into a proper argument with each other. But that's a completely separate video, and I digress. But name is equal to col name is what we're looking for now. So we can then close that off. So that's in the patch structure, we're going to patch to that data source. The record we want is going to be, we're going to look up into that data source and see if we've got anything with the same name. If we have, so we're back to our what do we update part of the formula. Well, we know how we structured this before. So we're going to open our curly braces and we're going to go in and I'm actually going to just close off my curly braces for a moment so they line up, and then go back into the middle and say, right, why won't you tab in? Thank you very much. What are we going to update? So what we want to update in this scenario is we're going to do the title, which is the name of the column in SharePoint. What do we want the title to be? Well, it's called col title in our collection. I can't spell title, comma. The next thing we want to update is the name. So the name is the name of the column in SharePoint, and we want col name from our collection. Then we're going to go and update the address, the SharePoint column, with col address. It becomes easy now. We've started to really sort of build the structure up for this. And then the status. Now the status is the only one that we're going to have a little bit of a slightly different formula on, because status is a drop-down column. So it's like a choice field. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we send the value across in a way that a drop-down column can read it. I'll do it now, show you how to do it, but I was planning on doing a future video of all the different ways to transpose data from one type to another in SharePoint, in Power Apps. There's lots of different ones you can do. You can make text columns become number columns, number become text. You can create table values, you can create record values, and so on. So we're going to create a record value for this one so that it can go across. And the way to do that is to wrap a curly brace, define the value, because that's what you're looking for, and that's going to be col status from our collection behind the scenes, and close our curly brace off. I know I've skimmed over that fairly quickly, but basically if you're creating a value, a record value like this for the drop down, you have to prefix with value because that's what it's looking for. If I just put a text string in there, it's going to whinge at me because it's going to go, oh, this should be a drop down. Slightly separate video. That's the workaround for doing that, which is why I kind of wanted to show a drop down field being slightly different. So that's that. So that's the update part of our formula. So now that we've done that, we can close off our patch function, which is there. Look, that to that. So we so far have gone for all records in this collection. Start this formula. We want to check if that particular record's name is in the data source name column. If it is, we want to patch to that data source and update the item in that data source, which is equal to col name. So that's the first part of it. And then this is the update that we're sending. So once we've done that, we're now back on our if statement. So the next thing we need to do is put a comma in. And remember, we've got an else value that says, oh, if it's not in there, we now need to create a new record instead. So we're back to our patch function. So this is the other part of the formula where we're going to say, right, we're going to patch to our data source. And we're going to get the first thing that we need to put in that's kind of unique, not unique to SharePoint, but is used in creating new records in SharePoint from Power Apps. So in the previous form, so if I put a comma in there and look at what the patch formula is asking for, it says patch, data source, record. We don't have a record in this example because we want to create a new one. So what do you put in record? Because you can't just skip over it, you can't leave it blank, and you can't start typing what you want to create. You need something in the record. Well, there's another handy little formula in here that's called defaults. So defaults, quite simply put, is the default values in your SharePoint list. So when you create columns, it says, oh, what do you want your default to be for this one? What's your default for this one? It might be blank, it might be a string of text, it might be something like that. But basically what defaults is saying is get those defaults values, use those for the type of column it is, for the information that you want in there. So we're saying, go to the list, get the default values and use that for your record portion. So we say, patch to me is the name of the list. So go and get the defaults from patch to me. And that's all it needs. It needs to know what they are so we can then basically pull back all the right information. Close off the defaults part and we're into our update. And I probably actually should have just dropped that down so it was a little bit neater to read, like so. I will paint the formatting over it at the end so you can see it properly neat and tidy. So once we've done that, we're then going to go into our, okay, let's create the record part. So we're going to open our curly braces, drop down, close our curly braces so they line up, and we're going to get ourselves in the middle, and we're going to go, right, we've done this already. It's the same stuff as above there, so I'm going to take that lot, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it because I like to save time. Apart from it's just not lined me up nicely there. That's going to really annoy me because it's going to be all out of kilter. There we go. But I will tidy up the formatting properly with the format painter in a moment. Let's make that a bit bigger and see where we've got to. So we're about ready to close off because we've got our setup there. So we need to find our place. I think it's three closing brackets, but let's basically show you the easy way of doing it. If I press one bracket close, it will instantly show me that this is the corresponding parentheses. If I do another one, it will show me this is the corresponding parentheses. And if I do another one, it will show me this is the corresponding parentheses. So it's three. I was right. Well, sort of right. I said two or three. So that closes off all of the things that we need to do. So you can see that a lot of that structure is really similar to what we had in sending data to the collection. We're just sending it to a different location. And there's a few nuances that we needed to cover off. Let me just format tidy that. Now we've got it all correct. Format paint. There you go, look, that's nice and neat and tidy. I was, again, not far away from it. I suppose I've got lazy since the format painter came in, and now I just do it there or thereabouts so I can read where I'm going and then tidy up at the end. So the fundamental differences in our formula are the for all, go through all the records that are in col patch. That's the first part that's fundamentally different. For all in the col patch list, do the following formula. Then we go into the same as we had before. We have our if statement that says if this is the case, start doing this part of it. And the patch then says patch to SharePoint, look up the record from patch to me where name is equal to col name. And then, oh, don't copy and paste. I'm sure Microsoft thought they were being helpful by that. If you highlight something and then drag your cursor, it will just copy and paste it. But That's a one step too far for me. It confuses me sometimes. So that is the update to that particular record. And then we've got a comma to go into our else value of the formula. And the else value is, okay, we need to create a new record. So we're going to patch to the SharePoint list. We're going to get the default values from that SharePoint list. So all the columns are set up with their defaults. And then we're going to create this record here. So that's my record there. So let's give that a whirl. That should be us sorted out. And then I might want to do one more thing to finish off the app itself. But that should be it for today. So what we want to do now is we've got our SharePoint list, which is that way, where we've got Mr. Daniel Halls won the street, an open record, and we've got Mr. Joe Bloggs won the road, a closed record. The reason Mr. Joe Bloggs didn't get into our collection in the app is because I created a rule that said only bring me the open records. So Joe Bloggs never made it into the app because we didn't care about closed records. A good way of tidying up how many items you bring back from SharePoint. That's in the first video on collections and patching. So what I want to do now is I want to basically hit the button and I should be able to send this lot across to there. Yeah, so there are no, oh, there might be an update. I haven't changed. Let me just make a change to me so I'm not at one the street anymore. So we can show you one being updated and 3 new records being added. So let's press play. So I'm Mr. Daniel Halls. All this still works based on name. And I'm going to move into shiny new house. That'll do. There you go. And we're going to send all this back off to SharePoint. So what should happen is I should press that. The for all formula should loop through all the items in the collection. It should go, there is a Daniel Halls. He's moved house. There isn't a Sandra Smith, create a record. There isn't a Tom Thumb, create a record. And there isn't a Joe, create a record. So let's press that. We will get the little marching ants across the top, or whatever you like to call them, the speedy dot racers and loading, and then my button ungrays out. Now, the nice thing about that, just as a note, you'll see that for when you submit a form, you press the button and it sort of goes off and that's it done. When you do a patch, it will actually loop through everything before anything else happens. So the button sort of almost locks itself. So what's nice is you can put some rules at the end of that don't run until you're finished. Once you're successfully through the patch, then it will do the next action. So you could put, that's where I like to put, say, a loading timer on, spinny loading circle in the middle would flash up and that would be running until the patch is finished. And when the patch finishes, that would then disappear. Nice features that you can add in there. Maybe we'll chuck one in a second. So what we'll do now is we'll go across to SharePoint and ta-da, we have got Mr. Daniel Halls is now in a shiny new house. Mr. Joe Bloggs is still in there closed. Sandra Smith, Tom Thumb, Joe. And we can do this in lots of different ways. What might be nice now is actually if I said to this, let's take Mr. Daniel Halls and let's make his record closed. Save, that's closed it in my collection, send to SharePoint. Run through my patch, button's finished, back over to here. Let's just give it a refresh. Oh no, there you go. They do. I was going to say they do refresh automatically usually. So there we go. So now that record is closed. That concludes our video on patching. As you can see, it's a really flexible way of sending data from Power Apps into your data source. It's also part of the video that we did on collections. So we did the same scenario, which was actually like the first video, if you like, where we focus more heavily on the formula for collections. It's a great video to watch before this one if you want to get really involved on how to build collections. That will give you all that insight there. And then this video gives you that real good base to build upon and get your collections patched to your data source. If you've enjoyed the video, please give us a like and ask any questions you have in the comments below. And I will always do my best to answer those for you. And who knows, if there's a really good question in there, we can turn it into a future video. I've been Daniel Halls. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.